Russia is preparing to launch the nuclear missile Oreshnik. The sky over the Kapustin Yar test range is closed. The Ukrainian armed forces have eliminated 50 Russian officers from Putin's elite units. Moscow is out of gasoline. Ukrainian drones destroyed a central Russian oil refinery. The Ukrainian armed forces have launched a counteroffensive. A village on the Drekna has been liberated. This has never happened before. The largest military factory in Chelyabinsk has been wiped off the face of the earth. Naval battle. A Russian warship has entered British waters. Oil refineries with Russian oil are burning all over Europe, and the US Senate recognizes Russia as a terrorist state. Trump strikes at the Kremlin, while the EU and US simultaneously impose restrictive sanctions. The Russian economy is finished. A slap in Putin's face, Armenia is heading towards the European Union. Hello, my name is Katerina Nestorenko, and right now, here are the main stories. But first, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose each other on YouTube. Last night, Russia once again attacked Ukraine with missiles and drones. According to the Air Force, the Russians attacked us with 130 strike drones of the Shahed, Geran and other types, launched from Kursk, Milerovo, Shatalovo, Orel, Primorsko, Akhtarsk and Chauda. From the temporarily occupied Crimea, about 80 of these drones were Shaheds. According to preliminary data from air defense, 92 enemy drones were shot down or suppressed. There were 25 strike drone hits recorded at 11 locations, as well as drone debris falling at 11 locations. More than 20 explosions occurred at the Middle Dnipro hydroelectric power plant in the Dnipropetrovsk region. In addition, at night, the Russians struck the railway station in Sumy. 3 people were injured, and both infrastructure and rolling stock were damaged. As a safety measure, Ukrzaliznytsia suspended the movement of some trains in the Sumy region. Kyiv also came under Russian shelling last night. The Podilsky district suffered the most in the capital. Fires broke out in 3 residential buildings and in cars parked nearby. The blast wave damaged windows in several houses at different addresses. More than 40 windows were blown out in one of the schools. Window glass was also damaged in a kindergarten. And this is a video showing the aftermath of a Shahed strike on the Domino Business Center in Kyiv's Podilsky district. The strike blew out the building's windows and wrecked a car parked nearby. In addition, debris from the downed drone fell near a synagogue. One of the Shaheds flew directly into an apartment in Kyiv, but fortunately it did not detonate. It was also an uneasy night in Russia. Explosions were heard in Chelyabinsk, 2,000 kilometers from the border with Ukraine. Yeah. It is reported that the Plasmas plant in Kopeisk near Chelyabinsk, which produces ammunition for barrel artillery, naval artillery, tanks and self-propelled guns, came under drone attack. The drone attack was also confirmed by local authorities. They reported 4 dead and several injured. And a little humor. What really happened near Chelyabinsk, according to a local resident? In detail.
The city of Ryazan, located in Russia.
The refinery is part of the Rosneft structure. It is one of the largest oil refining enterprises in Russia. Its capacity is about 17 million tons of oil per year. The Ryazan refineries produce all grades of automotive gasoline, diesel fuel, aviation kerosene, fuel oil, liquefied gases, bitumen and petrochemical feedstock. The plant supplies petroleum products to the Central Federal District and is one of the key fuel suppliers for Moscow and the region. This is not the first attack on the Ryazan refineries since the beginning of 2025. I really like, as they say, Russian oil refineries. Like this video if you do too. But besides Ukrainian drones, Russian oil is also being hit by sanctions. The US has finally imposed devastating sanctions against Lukoil and Rosneft. This was announced by American President Donald Trump.
I felt that the time had come. We waited a long time.
Washington stated that this decision is intended to increase pressure on Russia's energy sector and limit the Kremlin's ability to finance the war and support its weakened economy. Additionally, US President Donald Trump announced that he had cancelled a planned meeting with Putin in Budapest.
I cancelled the meeting with Putin. It seemed to me that we wouldn't achieve what we were supposed to achieve. That's why I did it. But we will do it in the future, every time we have a good conversation, but...
The US Treasury Department also confirmed the imposition of sanctions against Russia's Lukoil and Rosneft. In addition, it is reported that the sanctions will also apply to 34 subsidiaries of Rosneft and Lukoil. The US is calling on Russia to immediately cease fire and begin real negotiations to end the war in Ukraine.
President Putin did not come to the negotiations honestly and openly, as we had hoped. There were negotiations in Alaska. President Trump walked away, realizing that things were not moving forward. Backstage negotiations were taking place, but I believe the president is disappointed with their state. That is why we are announcing new sanctions against Russia.
The media reports that amid the imposition of sanctions, the shares of Lukoil and Lerosneft immediately plummeted. In addition, the US has stated its readiness for further restrictions if Russia does not cease its aggression and does not take a seat at the negotiating table. But that's not all. EU ambassadors have agreed on the 19th package of sanctions against the Russian Federation. Reuters reports this. The new package includes a ban on the supply of liquefied natural gas to the EU, a complete ban on all crypto services for Russian citizens. Travel restrictions for Russian diplomats have been imposed, and an additional 117 vessels of Russia's Blue Fleet have been added to the list. In addition, banks in Kazakhstan and Belarus, as well as 4 companies linked to China's oil industry, are also subject to sanctions. In fact, in Russia, the response to the sanctions came from a nearly sober Medvedev, who delivered the same old statement that it's everyone fighting against Russia, not the other way around.
The US is our adversary, and their talkative peacemaker has now fully embarked on the path of war with Russia. Yes, for now he doesn't always actively fight on the side of Banderite Kyiv, but now this is his conflict, not Biden the seniles. Of course, people will say that he had no other choice, that Congress pressured him, and so on. But that doesn't change the main point. The decisions that have been made are an act of war against Russia, and now Trump is in complete solidarity with a deranged Europe.
Personally, I definitely like this kind of news, because Russia only understands the language of force. And in my opinion, that's the only language you can use to talk to them. Reading the comments under previous episodes, I see that many of our viewers are from Kazakhstan, Moldova, Europe, and even the USA. We Ukrainians are very grateful for your support and proud to have such reasonable viewers. Let us know in the comments under this episode as well which country you're watching us from and whether people there support our fight against the empire of evil. I always enjoy reading your comments. And for now, we continue. Up next is the most interesting part. And now, to the news from the front. The Ukrainian armed forces have liberated Kucheryav Yar in the Donetsk region. Footage has appeared on social media showing a unit of the Ukrainian air assault forces, including the 132nd Separate Reconnaissance Battalion, liberating the village of Kucheryav Yar in the Dobropilya direction. This settlement was captured by the Russians during their breakthrough in Dobropilya. It is noted that as part of the liberation operation, Ukrainian defenders captured more than 50 Russian occupiers. In addition, according to the Deep State portal, the defense forces of Ukraine have regained positions near Novy Shakhtarsky in the Donetsk region. At the same time, analysts note that the Russians have occupied the village of Poltavka and have also advanced near Novotoretske, Shakhove, Ivanivka, Okhotniche, and Novovasilivka. And these images are simply heartbreaking. A video has appeared online showing residents of Marinka driving through the ruins of the city, filming the houses and streets where they, their friends, relatives, and neighbors once lived. In the 9-minute video, you won't find a single building suitable for living. The city has turned into a vast cemetery, slowly being overgrown with bushes and weeds. What has happened on the front and around it in the past hours, and what is happening right now? Find out in our report.
Russian mechanized assaults are suffering complete failure. Equipment is burning in all directions and the occupiers are being transferred to motorcycles. Ukrainian armed forces strikes on Russian rear positions are crippling Putin's economy, and Russian citizens are now openly calling for a strike on the Kremlin.
The Kremlin isn't here, damn it. They need to hit the Kremlin. They got the coordinates wrong.
Zaporizhia is under threat. What all military analysts have been talking about has begun. And also, Pokrovsk, a thorn in the Kremlin side, is holding on, drawing Russian reserves and preventing Moscow from gaining a strategic advantage along the entire front line. Russia is trying to take advantage of the last weeks of good weather to advance as much as possible on the front. This explains the record losses of enemy heavy equipment in October compared to the entire year of 2025. Just in the past day, 2 tanks and more than a dozen armored fighting vehicles were destroyed.
In theory, Small assault infantry groups can advance, but certainly not to any significant depth. This may indicate that right now there is an attempt at a mechanized offensive aimed at breaking through the front line across a width of at least 6 to 8 kilometers, just as described in military textbooks and combat regulations, and to advance at least several dozen kilometers. Heavy equipment is being used for this purpose.
The most well-prepared assault units, both in terms of equipment and personnel, are traditionally concentrated in the Pokrovsk direction. However, round-the-clock attacks are not bringing the occupiers the desired result.
They are hoping for. The enemy's superior forces are present on all sectors of the front, including the Pokrovsk direction, which remains truly the hottest spot, and the Russian army is attacking here more than anywhere else. We're saying that the Russians are unlikely to repeat such frontal actions today, because it's clear that the 51st Combined Arms Army, which is attacking in this direction, already has plenty of other problems.
And the main one is the encirclement of Russian troops near Dobropilya. For about a month now, Moscow has been trying to transfer reserves there, which significantly disperses the efforts of the Russian grouping. As a result, all that has been achieved near Pokrovsk is the presence of small sabotage and reconnaissance groups on the outskirts of the city.
Indeed, counter-sabotage operations are very active today. Accordingly, the main task for the defense forces is to drive the Russians out of urban buildings as much as possible, because engaging in urban combat is the Russians' objective at this stage. To gain a foothold in the city accordingly, in order to wait for reinforcements from other forces.
At the same time, it seems that another hotspot may become the Zaporizhzhia direction. After Pokrovsk, this is the second place where the Russians are trying to break through with large mechanized columns. However, they are also unable to achieve any results there. The situation has reached the point where even the Z military correspondents, who usually praise all the wise decisions of the command, have been forced to change their rhetoric.
The enemy can easily send 30 FPV drones at a single tank, and of course, no tank can withstand 30 FPV drones. That's the whole point. To hell with all those so-called experts who keep pushing for more recruitment just to send people to be wiped out in columns.
However, in the high offices of the occupiers, they stopped counting losses a long time ago. The main thing is to ensure an advance at any cost, and where that's not possible, at least to show sufficient determination.
I believe that for the enemy it's extremely important to get as close as possible to the regional center of Zaporizhzhia. Control over this settlement would not only allow Vladimir Putin to claim that he controls the entire Zaporizhzhia region, but would also seriously damage the infrastructure, especially the industry. The industrial area of this regional center in the south of Zaporizhzhia region is quite far from the settlement, which means the enemy has the opportunity to maneuver forces and resources.
At the same time, today's maneuvers are mostly aimed at controlling Ukrainian logistics. After all, a large weapons hub in the form of the regional center allows the Ukrainian armed forces to quickly deliver ammunition and reserves.
In the Poltavka, Malinovka, Uspenovka sector, Russian infantry regularly carries out assault operations mainly using convicts and other expendables. The logistics situation is about the same as in all other directions. The Russian armed forces are trying to control all transport routes, setting up FPV drone carousels, including the use of optics.
However, attempts to quickly rush through the kill zone sometimes end in bizarre incidents, such as this self-destruction against a disabled vehicle.
They were heading into the attack, but because of the smoke from smoke grenades, they didn't see the knocked-out armored vehicle and crashed into it one after another.
At the same time, intense resistance continues in the Russian rear as well. For example, a drone and Storm Shadow cruise missile strike the day before appears to have permanently shut down the Bryansk chemical plant.
The results of the strike are still being clarified, but according to monitoring channels, the plant has been completely destroyed. Photos of missile tail sections scattered around the area were published in Telegram channels. The Bryansk chemical plant is an important component of the Russian military-industrial complex. At this facility, the occupiers produce gunpowder, explosives, and components for rocket fuel.
By the way, Ukrainian attacks on Russian military-industrial facilities seem to have annoyed Russians so much that they are finally starting to realize where the real source of all their problems lies.
You shouldn't be hitting here, damn it. You should be striking the Kremlin. You've got the coordinates all wrong, damn it.
And finally, a wonderful story from the SBU. After watching yet another propaganda video about Russian light aircraft intercepting drones, the security service decided to make their own video. The specialists quickly and efficiently copied the provided coordinates and set the next drone route right to them.
I never cease to admire the courage and heroism of Ukrainian soldiers. They hold the front and stand against a huge horde that vastly outnumbers them. That's why I urge everyone to support the armed forces of Ukraine. And if you can't do it financially, write them words of support in the comments. I know they're watching us. An oil refinery in Bratislava, which processes Russian oil, caught fire. As is known, this plant belongs to the Hungarian company Naval. It processes Russian oil delivered via the Druzhba pipeline.
The Bratislava oil refinery, operated by Slovnaft PS, has a processing capacity of 124,000 barrels per day. Founded in 1957, it is one of the most complex oil refineries in Europe. Its petrochemical division, Slovnaft Petrochemicals, is integrated into the refining sector of MOL, the largest oil and gas company in Hungary.
The cause of the fire has not been disclosed at this time, and Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico has not yet commented on the incident. Let me remind you that this is already the third fire at a refinery in Europe in recent times.
In recent days, explosions have also been reported at the Danube refinery, the largest in Hungary processing Russian oil, and at the Lukoil refinery in the city of Ploiești, Romania. As a result of the explosion, one person was injured. A criminal case has been opened under articles concerning violations of labor protection laws and causing harm to health through negligence.
A Russian warship was intercepted by the British Navy in their territorial waters. Sky News reports that in the North Sea, the HMS Duncan destroyer and a Wildcat helicopter were deployed to escort the Russian ship Vice Admiral Kulakov through the English Channel.
A Navy spokesperson stated that this is the first time a Royal Navy warship has been placed under the direct command of the alliance to participate in such an operation. The monitoring was carried out from last Friday to Sunday. The destroyer used advanced sensors and systems to intercept the Russian vessel in the North Sea. It tracked its westward passage through the English Channel to the island of Ouessant off the coast of France. A Dutch aircraft and the French Navy also took part in the operation.
In my opinion, that's a very appropriate response to a Russian warship. So that the Russians, God forbid, don't forget which direction their warships are supposed to go, Ukraine will purchase Gripen fighter jets from Sweden. And yes, this became known yesterday. Whereas today it became clear that Ukraine plans to pay for these fighter jets using frozen Russian assets. This was announced by Swedish Defense Minister Paul Jonsson. And now, let's look at some numbers. One fighter jet of this model costs about $85 million. An order for 100 aircraft would amount to $8.5 billion. Meanwhile, Sweden plans to sell Ukraine between 120 and 150 units. But here's what's interesting. Right now, there are debates in the European Union about how Ukraine should spend this money if they actually manage to reach an agreement on it.
The government is divided on whether Kyiv should be urged to buy weapons from Europe rather than the United States. Some leaders insist that giving preference to European manufacturers should be a mandatory condition, while others question whether the EU even has the right to tell a country at war from whom it should buy weapons, according to Politico.
Reuters, in turn, reports that Ukraine opposes such restrictions and demands the freedom to manage these assets as it sees fit.
As the publication notes, the money is needed to purchase weapons from any country, to rebuild what has been destroyed by Russian attacks, and to pay compensation to those affected. Part of the loan will be allocated for cooperation with European defense companies, but Ukraine insists on having autonomy in how the funds are spent.
And while the EU is still unable to decide how Ukraine should manage these assets, Belgian Prime Minister Bart de Wever has stated that his country will block the confiscation of frozen Russian assets unless 3 conditions are met.
First, Belgium demands a full distribution of legal risks among EU countries, since significant amounts of Russian assets are held in Belgium's Euroclear. Second, the country insists on guarantees in case the funds have to be returned. And third, Belgium wants other countries where Russian assets are also held to take similar steps.
De Wever says that if these conditions are not met, he will do absolutely everything possible to block the decision on a reparations loan for Ukraine using frozen Russian assets.
According to him, such a move could lead to serious consequences. But Moscow is capable of responding by confiscating the property of European companies, and such actions would create a dangerous legal precedent. If you want to make decisions that have never been made before in history, you need to start with a legal foundation, the Prime Minister noted.
In short, as we can see, when it comes to frozen Russian assets, there are currently far more questions than answers. Therefore, we will continue to follow this topic and will update you on developments in future episodes. The US Senate committee has approved 3 bills at once to put pressure on Russia and support Ukraine. Specifically, we are talking about the Stop Russia and China. A bill that provides for improving the mechanism for using frozen Russian assets in favor of Ukraine, and a bill recognizing Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism.
Bill S. 2805, which declares the Russian Federation a state sponsor of terrorism, stipulates that no later than 60 days after the law comes into force, the U.S. Secretary of State must submit a report to the U.S. Congress, which must establish and confirm that Ukrainian children abducted by Russia since the start of the full-scale invasion have been reunited with their guardian families. The process of reintegrating such children into Ukrainian society is ongoing. If the U.S. Secretary of State cannot confirm this, he must immediately designate the Russian Federation as a state sponsor of terrorism. Bill S-2918, which introduces the Repo Act, provides for the transfer of all frozen Russian sovereign assets, amounting to approximately $5 billion and under U.S. jurisdiction, into an interest-bearing account. The document calls on the U.S. president to redirect at least $250 million from this account to Ukraine every 90 days.
Their bill is called Stop Russia and China.
Bill S-2657's call, Stop Russia and China, is intended to prevent China from supporting Russia's war in coordination with U.S. allies and partners, particularly by blocking financial channels and imposing sanctions on Chinese organizations and individuals involved in exporting weapons and dual-use technologies to Russia.
Committee Chairman and Senator Jim Risch told Suspilne that it is currently impossible to vote on these bills in the U.S. Senate due to the government shutdown.
We are cautiously optimistic that we will get to this soon, because this is obviously a central issue right now, and it is one of the things we can do. The House of Representatives will soon return to work, and these issues will be among the first on the agenda, the senator said.
And what do you think? Will this bill, which is so important for Ukraine, be given the so-called green light? Ukrainian defenders have eliminated more than 50 Russian officers from the elite Senezh and Kubinka units, as well as representatives of the main directorate of Russian intelligence and special operations forces. This is a very serious loss and a blow to the enemy's forces, as they managed to destroy top-class specialists whose training takes many years. Details in our report.
More than 3,000 kilometers. That is the current length of the front line between Ukraine and Russia. Of that, almost 1,000 kilometers are active combat zones. Hundreds of kilometers where Ukrainian defenders break the backbone of an army that was once called the second strongest in the world every single day. And every meter of this line is a story of courage, loss, and unbreakable will. At this front, not only columns of equipment and infantry are destroyed, but also Russia's military elite. During the full-scale invasion, Ukrainian fighters have eliminated dozens of special forces from the elite Senezh and Kubinka units, those whom even in Russia are called the elite of the elite.
Losses of such fighters are especially painful for Russia. Each of them is not an ordinary soldier, but a specialist who has undergone years of training. Training a single such officer takes years and requires significant resources. You mentioned I Want to Live.
Recently, a documentary was released to the public about the elimination of a sabotage and reconnaissance group from the Senezh Special Purpose Center that was operating in the Chernihiv region. This operation became one of the most successful since the beginning of the full-scale war. Ukrainian intelligence officers from the 54th Separate Reconnaissance Battalion, together with border guards from the 105th Detachment named after Prince Volodymyr the Great, eliminated 6 enemy officers. The bodies of those killed, as well as weapons and equipment, were captured.
These days, they operate by entering Ukrainian territory with GoPro cameras turned on, recording everything they do. If you can even call that work. Murder, sabotage, it's essentially terrorism. And they are the first to show this to their, perhaps, commanders or superiors as a report. That's the first thing. And secondly, they post all of this online to intimidate people. There are videos titled, How I Spent This Summer. And in these videos, there are direct montages of Ukrainians being killed, Ukrainian soldiers, Ukrainian civilians, innocent people.
At the Senezh and Kubinka centers are the key units of the Russian Federation's Special Operations Forces, reporting directly to the General Staff. It is there that the best of the best are selected, those who are supposed to carry out the most complex, covert and dangerous missions. They are trained using Western methods and deployed in operations outside the country from Ukraine to Africa. But in Ukraine, even such an elite prove powerless. Those whom Moscow calls invisible fighters become visible on Ukrainian fields.
Down! Stand! Come here! I've got it! Got it! Got it! Get out!
According to the I Want to Live project, during the war, Ukraine has eliminated at least 58 fighters from the Russian Special Operations Forces of the GRU and FSB. For the enemy's army, these are not just losses. This is a blow to the core personnel, to those who were supposed to conduct reconnaissance, coordinate operations, and prepare new sabotage missions. And while Russian propaganda continues to talk about precision weaponry and the professionalism of the army, the reality is completely different. Across more than 3,000 kilometers of front, Ukraine is not only holding the line but is also methodically eliminating those whom the Kremlin considers untouchable. And no matter how long Russia continues this aggression, the defense forces will keep giving the same response. No invader will remain alive on Ukrainian soil.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
The European Union may soon be welcoming a new member. Armenia could become a full-fledged member of the community. What is driving this ambition, and how will the Russian Federation, which seeks to control post-Soviet countries, respond to this move? Find out more in our report.
The Armenian government will continue to pursue a pro-European course, despite the fact that certain political forces are pushing for closer ties with Russia. This was stated by Armenian Foreign Minister Ararat Mirzoyan in an interview with Deutsche Welle.
Quite a lot of time has already passed, but I truly believe that the relations between Azerbaijan and Armenia are gradually moving in the right direction. Very serious negotiations are underway, and by the beginning of this year, fundamental agreement had already been reached on the main points of the peace treaty between Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Mirzoyan also spoke about the negotiations with Azerbaijan and the beginning of the process to determine the general position of the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan.
And then, in August of this year, at the initiative of President Trump, a meeting took place in Washington between the leaders of Azerbaijan and Armenia, during which very significant documents and declarations were signed, including the initialing of a document on peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia.
For the first time in 35 years, Kazakh grain was transported from Azerbaijan to Armenia. A positive trend toward peace was also noted by the President of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev. The Prime Minister of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan, assured that Armenia is already technically ready to provide transit for cargo trucks through its territory from Turkey to Azerbaijan and vice versa.
And just yesterday, the leader of Azerbaijan, the head of state, announced that Azerbaijan is opening up transit opportunities for Armenia through its territory. And then we became acquainted with the statement from the Armenian side. The leader of Armenia stated that Armenia's territory is also open for transit shipments from various countries to Azerbaijan.
The Armenian foreign minister refers to Russia as the main partner in the economy and trade. But at the same time, the politician notes that there have been many issues on which Armenia and Russia have reached agreements. However, on many other issues, the countries have still not reached a consensus.
Democracy is our choice. We are deepening our relations with the European Union, with the United States of America, that is, with our strategic partners. Cooperation with other countries is our sovereign choice, our decision. So either normal partners respect each other and each other's decisions, or this partnership needs to be renewed.
According to Ararat Mirzoyan, even before submitting an official application and receiving a response from the European Union, Armenia has already begun working with it, significantly deepening bilateral relations. In addition, negotiations are underway regarding several new documents. Work on a new partnership program has been completed, and it will be signed within the next 3 months.
Russia has begun a new phase of nuclear exercises at the Kapustin Yar testing range, during which it plans to launch Oreshnik medium-range ballistic missiles and RS-26 Rubezh missiles. It is reported that the maneuvers will continue until the end of October. According to information bulletins for civil aviation, during this period there may be temporary flight restrictions and even the announcement of air raid alerts due to the activity of Russian tests. It is noted that these launches do not pose a direct threat to Ukraine. At the same time, under Putin's personal supervision, another exercise of Russia's strategic nuclear forces was conducted, involving ground, naval, and air components.
Today, we have I emphasize a scheduled exercise for the management of nuclear forces.
The Kremlin reported successful practical launches of intercontinental cruise missiles. In particular, an intercontinental Yars missile was launched from the Plesetsk Cosmodrome towards the Kura test range in Kamchatka, near the border with the United States. The launch was carried out from the nuclear-powered missile submarine Bryansk in the Barents Sea. A Sineva ballistic missile was launched. In addition, two 95MS long-range aviation aircraft practiced launches of air-launched cruise missiles. According to Western military experts, the goal is to demonstrate the readiness of Russia's strategic forces and increase pressure on the West ahead of winter. And what do you think Russia is really planning? Write your thoughts in the comments. Don't hold back. How do you like our news? Let us know what we should change to become better. We will definitely take your feedback into account. In the meantime, give this video a like to support what we do. And be sure to subscribe to our channel Ukraine Today so you don't miss future episodes. See you soon.